Hi, today I wanted to unpack an acronym that I actually recently encountered. It's something that I actually wasn't formally aware of in terms of this terminology when I was completing my PhD dissertation, but it absolutely reflects the dynamics that I found when I was researching clergy women and psychological abuse that they experienced and their decisions to leave active ministry. I'm not a huge fan of acronyms, particularly when working with in issues of trauma and gender-based violence. I just find that sometimes the acronym takes away the power of the actual language behind it. But in this case, I think it's really helpful in diagnosing a really manipulative tactic against women, particularly those who are revealing unhealthy and toxic dynamics in their workplace or in their personal relationships. So the term is DARVO, DARVO, and this stands for deny, attack, and then reverse victim and offender. So there's the three components: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So in unpacking this, a lot of these issues come up with my coaching clients and as well with my research, but this really packages it in a way that's so much more diagnosable and identifiable and helpful for people who may not be aware or fully cognizant of these dynamics, or perhaps are unwilling to admit that they occur. This really packages it in a powerful way that could really promote a lot of social and systemic change. So with the deny piece, let's do a hypothetical. There's a woman in a toxic workplace environment, and she's observing and experiencing a lot of behavior that is dehumanizing, belittling, in terms of equity as well. Maybe there's issues of unequal pay or access to benefits that she may be understanding that others are receiving, any number of things that she may be reporting to superiors or other colleagues in her context that are unjust, unfair, and discriminatory. The next step of that is people who have perhaps some positional power to make changes around that may minimize, gaslight, or deny those requests, observations, or experiences. And in doing so, in that denial, they are then attacking the credibility and trying to, I guess, unpack the credibility of the woman herself, bringing these things forward. And of course, this is classic gaslighting. It causes the woman herself to ask, is it really that bad? Am I crazy? Is this stuff really happening? And of course, most and probably 99 out of 100 times, she is absolutely correct. And these are actual experiences that should be addressed. So the denial, and then the counterattack, and then the person who is responding to this woman's concerns then reverses the victim-offender relationship, claiming that they themselves are the victim and the accuser is actually the offender. And what this does is it weaponizes women's anger. It weaponizes women's desire for equitable organizations, equitable relationships, and it uses that sense of justice and at times anger and frustration against that woman herself. And so I'll put it in a different way. It's in today's age when women have more agency and there are institutional policies that support this kind of reporting, when a woman comes forward with this and responds to what I would call just general bad behavior or toxic behavior, or somebody just doing something that's out of line in most social instances, her response is treated like the offense itself. And it really shifts the focus and root of the issues at play and turns the accusations on her. And of course, this creates then a spiral of scapegoating, targeting, bullying, and denial at the worst level in ways that can be extremely abusive and dehumanizing. So when I talk about weaponizing women's anger, what happens here is that expressions of frustration, injustice, or anger that are expressed by women, and in the same way, perhaps in other instances expressed by men, are perceived in completely polar opposite ways. And I'll give you an example. So if a man is in an HR meeting and addressing something that's considered unjust or something that he wants to address in any kind of professional setting, In many cases, that anger can be perceived as passionate, decisive, strong convictions, and sort of at its most patriarchal sense, men's anger can be seen as just and heroic, even when that anger comes out in really oppressive and aggressive ways. Whereas if you have a woman who is bringing forward issues in a toxic workplace situation and probably not even presenting it in a traditionally angry way, but is just holding up a mirror to these dynamics, her emotions and her expression of those emotions are seen as vengeful, bitter, bitchy, mad or crazy, and unhinged. And I think when women are perceived this way and continue to be perceived this way, it really sets up a narrative for women that they feel that they cannot address these issues in ways that reflect their honest range of human emotion. It suppresses that human emotion in ways that are unhealthy and unfair and unjust. And the women that I interviewed for my doctoral research time and time again said that as pastors, they felt they could not express anger in any way, regardless of how just that anger was, that it was always turned around against them, in which the person being accused was then flipping it around and saying that they were the victim of that woman's anger. And the most simple thing could be a woman in a leadership position putting her hand firmly on a desk table to get people's attention, something that would never be seen as volatile or decisive if a man were to do this. The simple gesture of raising one's hand and placing it firmly on a desk or a conference table could be seen as a sign of aggression. And that is weaponized against that woman to discredit her and to invalidate her credibility in the issues that she's bringing up. So I share this with you today because there are instances right now in which this is being debated, and women's livelihoods are at stake. And it's imperative that people see these underlying dynamics at play and these manipulative tactics to shift blame and deny the credibility of women bringing forth important observations of discriminatory behavior in their workplace settings. So if you are experiencing this or someone else in your work context is, there are a couple things that you can do to safeguard yourself and to make sure that you are taking as good care of yourself as you can in these really toxic situations. And the first is to acknowledge these tactics, acknowledge this dynamic, this DARVO phenomenon: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So if you're able to really categorize this in the instances that you are seeing it and really name it, it's going to concretize these observations in ways that will help you stay clear when you are being gaslit or in these instances are being denied. Second, and this is always the case in any kind of a toxic environment, both personal relationships or in the professional setting, is keep record of what's being said, when, where, and how. And have that in a safe place that you can recall, that you can use as documentation and evidence if this is to be brought to a more policy level in your organization. Also, it's important with the people that are doing this reverse tactic to choose your battles wisely and to avoid arguing back, because at this point we're dealing with incredibly irrational and threatened people who are trying to manipulate this process and really remove sort of the underlying truth of what's happening. And so in many ways you simply can't argue with someone like that. So minimizing contact and the temptation to argue back. And lastly, and most importantly, protect yourself, both emotionally, psychologically, and physically. Removing oneself from the physical space of where these dynamics are occurring as much as possible, finding your inner circle of trust, identifying people within your workplace setting who can be witnesses to this behavior, and of course, really leaning into that inner circle of trust that I talk about a lot. Those very close family and friends and colleagues who know you, understand you, value you, and will stand up for you in ways that will be really important as you navigate this really challenging context. So I'll include a couple resources below, including a really important journal article out of the Journal of Aggression, Maltreatment, and Trauma from two psychologists from the University of Oregon that really spell this out really clearly. And I hope that this becomes something that's more part of the public discourse, so that women who are bringing forward these concerns are heard, and most importantly, are believed and responded to in ways that are important for their recovery and moving forward in their lives.